Hey, welcome to Worship Tutorials. Today, we are going to unveil most of our process for capturing and profiling and doing our tone match process, more specifically, tone match Gen 2.
Yes. These are the best sounding Helix and fractal presets, Line 6 and fractal presets we've ever made.
I will say, some people are probably going to get rubbed by that. But here's the thing.
It's true.
What's the point of doing something if you're not constantly getting things to be better?
We like things to constantly sound better.
Exactly.
We're also going to show off a new amp that we have here at Worship Tutorials. It's going to be available. It is a Marshall Jimi Hendrix Super 100. Marshall made a few of these in the early 2000s. It's a hand-wired recreation of Jimi Hendrix's 100-watt Marshall. We're going to show off that in the capture process, and then you're going to hear it at the end of this video via the Tone Match Gen 2 package. Check it out. I'm going to show you how we tone match an amp. You ready?
Yeah.
Step 2.
Have a Marshall.
Gosh.
It's loud.
So the first step with creating our tone match presets and captures and thing is actually capturing the amp. So this is the amp room. Not many people have been in. This is like the inner sanctuary, the holy of holies of Worship Tutorials.
It's very quiet in here.
It's very well sound
It's not
treated.
quite an anechoic chamber.
So you do this, and it just dies. It's pretty cool. Today, we're gonna take on the Marshall Super 100, the Jimi Hendrix. You can hear it. You can hear the power. Just idle. It's at idle. The Hendrix rebuilt thing. So it's a 100-watt plexi, basically. We're miking. Actually, Nick and I. Nick, do you remember? We did this test where we mic'd all 4 speakers on this cabinet. And we determined that this one, which is technically the bottom left one, because usually it stands up like this speaker is the best sounding one. And then you can see...
What about it?
We did. It just sounded best.
It's true.
Like,
I mean, they all were very similar, but this one sounded best to us. Yeah. What I've done here is you can see this blue tape. Typically what I'll do is I'll mark where we like the speaker to, or the microphones to be placed. And it's on this speaker, it's like right outside on the edge of the cap of the speaker. Or sorry, the edge of the cap, the little circular part in the middle. And then we're also miking it on this side rather than this side because it's closer. It sounds a little better on this side. We tested that too. And I think it's because there's another speaker right here. So this is sort of the ideal mic placement that we've determined. And it's marked by tape so we can easily recreate it. And then when we shoot impulse responses of this cab, we'll know that this is where the mics go. And now the microphones we're using are a Royer 121 and an Earthworks SR25. The actual amplifier, the head, is over here, kind of where we're gonna sit. So I put like a cable loom in the wall, so you can see this is one side of it. It comes up through the wall here. It comes out over here. And then it sort of connects to the preamp and the amplifier and all that. So what we're running through the wall right now, it is the speaker cable. So speaker cable coming out of the back of the amp here, runs into the wall, through the wall, to the cabinet over there behind Bradford, if you could see right through it.
Or Vanna White.
Yes. I've also done a lot of testing because cable length is a thing, right? So I've done a lot of testing whether you plug just one cable into the speaker and mic it versus like this length of cable, and I can't hear the difference. Speaker cable is not like instrument cable. It's a little more robust. So I have done that testing. Now the other thing that's going through the wall are 2 XLR cables, at least 2, but for now just 2. And so those are the 2 cables that we're using for the microphones. So they're connected to the mics there. They come out here, and they connect to the preamp that we use for all of our tone matching and capturing. This is the Neve 1073 DPX. It has EQ. It's a stereo preamp. Has EQ on both channels. We'll tweak this EQ a little bit, but we don't do a lot with the EQ. We do find that
It's sweetening.
Yeah, Even if you don't do much with it, if you take it out and put it in, it makes things sound better, just running through the circuit. So from there, we plug a guitar into the amplifier. This is the Marshall Super 100 Jimi Hendrix amplifier. And then we just start dialing things in. So it's important when we capture something, when you're going to play a digital version of this amplifier, whether it's a quad cortex capture, a Kemper profile, a tonex capture, an Axe-Fx or Line 6 tone match patch, it's important to also understand that what you're hearing or what we're capturing and delivering is the mic'd sound of the amp. So it's the sound of the microphones on the cab, which is very different than plugging into the thing with the 412 and just hitting a chord. That's a much different experience.
And even different than, say, using if there was a version of the modeled amp in the Helix and the Fractal. But even still, what you're hearing is they have you put mics on it. Yeah. You're not just getting an amp. They're trying to emulate a mic'd up situation too, because that's actually a selection. Yeah. You can choose mics, you can change placement, all that stuff.
So it's important when we set this all up, we are listening to the mic'd amplifier. So the way this works is it comes in, this is connected to the interface. So we're going to hear it coming in right here. These are the two mics, 1073.1, 1073.2. And then we're going to listen to them through the studio monitors here. So that's what we're listening to. That's the sound that we're capturing is the mic'd cab. And then we are replicating that on all these different digital units that you can download these presets for. So I've marked these settings that I've got because this sounds good to us. So this is going to be our 2 capture on the bright channel or the high treble channel. We're just going to listen to it. I'm actually going to record it so you can hear exactly what we're hearing. Oh, gotta learn how to use Logic first.
That'd be good.
Yeah. So I'm now recording both of these channels coming through. So this is how it sounds. What do you think? Are we ready to capture that? More treble, less treble?
Yeah, that sounds pretty.
It's a little bright, but this is how we approach these things. I'm usually using this Telecaster because it's my favorite guitar of all time. I usually use this to dial things in, and we know that these are tele pickups, and they're pretty middle of the road, like vintage tele pickups. So we dial things in a little bright because in all of these units, you've got EQ controls. So if you're playing a humbucker guitar, that's probably going to be perfect, right? Or maybe a little on the dark side.
Or only require a little bit of...
Yeah.
Instead of drastic changes.
Right. So if you dial it in exactly for this guitar, then if somebody's playing a Les Paul, it's going to be a little dark. So a lot of times if we're using a single coil guitar to dial things in, we'll go a little bright. If we're using a humbucker guitar, we'll go a little dark. Right? And that way it's kind of right down the middle. So I think we're ready to capture. We capture it with 3 different devices. We capture with tonex. This is currently, until new stuff comes on the market. Maybe when you're watching this, who knows? Maybe Helix Part 2 is out and it captures amps and we'll use that. We know nothing. All right. We capture with tonex. We capture with Kemper. We capture with quad cortex. Tonex takes the longest to do its thing. So we start with tonex, and then while it's calculating it, while it's processing the capture, we then capture with Kemper and QC, and the amp never changes. So you get a set of captures on all these devices at the exact same settings, which would be good for A/B demos if you wanted something like that. That's not what we're doing here. So first we're starting with tonex. We've gone through the whole tonex setup. We're using the tonex capture box. If you don't know what tonex capturing sounds like, most of them send these weird whoop, 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 whoop kind of signals through. Tonex is like actual guitar playing. Check it out. Well, it starts with this. You gotta be quiet now. Just wait. So it's like a real guitar player playing riffs.
There's like 5 minutes of random guitar parts that it's part of Tonex's whole process. Country, rock, pop, metal, all that. It's super cool.
My favorite is listening to like the gent parts through a clean amp.
Yeah, they try to do like pinch harmonics and it doesn't work because the amp is dead quiet.
It's cool when you crank it though. My neighbors probably, because a lot of them over here they're retired and over there he works from home. So they probably think I'm an awesome guitar player, but I just play exactly the same thing over and over and over and over again. Actually, I've tested. This is underground. We're in a basement. This is in the dugout part. I've walked the perimeter and you can't hear a thing outside, which is pretty nice. So the capture process for Tonex is done.
Is it done?
It's not. It's done, but
Part
it's
A
not
is
done.
done.
Yeah, step 1 is done. So the capture's done. Next is the training.
Okay. Yeah, I guess it's done.
So the training gives you 3 options. There's fast, there's default, and there's advanced. Now, there's been a lot of content out there about the training. We've done a lot of testing. Default always works for us for the type of amps that we're doing. So it's clean and overdriven tones. This is optimal, right? Advanced is for like higher gain tone and fuzz style tones, which is not what we're doing here. So we typically default to default and hit next, hit start. And this part takes a while, unless you have a computer with an NVIDIA graphics card, a particular one, which we do not. Got the old MacBook here. So this is going to take some time.
20 minutes or so?
Yeah, probably. It gives us enough time to do the other captures. And this doesn't need the amp to be quiet while this happens. In fact, it says during this process, you can come to the player and like play different amp models if you want. And this will go in the background. So now what we're going to do next is Kemper. So we're just going to set up the Kemper and do the Kemper profile. Maybe. Does he live in California? All right, the Kemper profile is done. This is what it sounds like. It's got a little bit of compression, delay, reverb. We set the rig up. It sounds pretty good.
That even sounds better.
We've done Kemper. Tonex is at almost 70% of the way through. Quad cortex is line. You can hear it. It's lined in. So we're going to do the new capture. Decide you want to try and capture a lot of amps. You just have to get really good at tuning all this out. All right, ready? Here's the quad cortex. Here's the amp. They sound the same. That's done. Save. This is a head and cab. It is for guitar. It's now in the quad cortex. So what we can do now is we can bring it into here and we can just test it. Here's the Super 100, right? We can hit it with some effects if we want. Ooh, that's good. That's the antique. It's an 808. Alrighty, now we get to hear the tone model, which is Tonex's capture, versus the actual amp. That is right, spot on. We've captured the amp now through all the devices, so we're going to repeat this process many times because we will do both channels. So this is the treble input, this is the normal input. We'll do both. We'll jump them and do it as well, and we'll do it all through the gain range. So we'll just kind of crank the gain up until it sounds like sort of the next notch gained up. And then we do adjust the tone stack as we increase gain to sort of optimize the settings. We're also going to make a few captures using the low input. This would be considered the high input. This is the low input. The low input is going to give you a little more headroom. It'll clean things up a little bit. So we'll probably do like a 2 and a 3 capture on the low input for each channel too. So there's a lot of capturing that's going to happen, and each one takes 20, 30-ish minutes to do. So you can work through an amp like this in a day, maybe a day and a half or 2 days at the most. Once we get the captures done, we'll then take impulse responses of the cabinet of those microphones in exactly the way that they're set up, and that will allow us to begin doing the tone matching process for the Line 6 and Fractal hardware. So we're going to take some IR captures of this cabinet. Now, these IRs are just the cabinet and the speaker and the system that's used to capture it, so the microphones and the preamps. And we have full IR capture packs that you can use, IR cab capture packs. That you can use that with Iridium, you can use with Helix, anything that loads an impulse response. It's not the tone match IR that we're going to end up with, but it's part of the whole process of building these things out. So I've got the mics on the cab through the Neve 1073 preamp. None of that has changed. It's exactly as we've captured the amp. Now I'm going to take some sweeps, make some sweeps, some IRs of the cab. It's done.
All right, so now we're going to talk about the tone match process. We've talked, there is another video, it's a little more specific. It was like when we first did this.
Yeah.
A year and a half ago or so, I think.
Feels
maybe
like forever. It feels like a lifetime
2022.
ago. I lived in a different state.
You did, different house, yes. And we talked more specifically, I definitely think that's still worth a check out, so we'll make sure we link that.
Nice link below.
But Brian, being the scientist, business major, statistics class-taking man that he is,
We were talking about statistics earlier.
we were. He reevaluated yet again, and this is what we've told people, and they're not super. Somebody came, suggested, is that just marketing jargon, what have you? It's like, no,
it's different.
We did in fact find a way to take more of the whole process of the amp, cab, mics, all that into consideration to make this better. And so, Brian, it's always better for you to talk about these things because my brain always is like,
I'm deep into the nerdery of it.
yes. My brain is like, I just need to figure out how to do what Brian says. So this is how I remember it. I'm going to do this thing. So Brian.
Yeah, so as we explained in that previous video Bradford mentioned, what we're doing with the tone match patches, that this only pertains to Line 6 hardware and Fractal hardware. Because if you're playing the capture of the amp via Quad Cortex, Tonex, Kemper, or even Headrush Prime, that's just the capture of the amp.
I do think those get better
capture.
too. We get better at making that sound good.
The room that they're being captured in sounds better now.
Yeah.
We've sort of refined the process. But for the Line 6 and Fractal Tone Match Gen 2 patches, we're still doing the same thing. What we do is we take an existing amp model that is in the Helix ecosystem or the Fractal ecosystem. Sometimes it's easy because if we're tone matching a matchless C30, the matchless
That
C30
exists.
amp model is in there, so that's what we use. The Marshall Super 100 is not in either of those devices.
There's lots of Marshall types,
so
but not that one.
We will be taking Marshall type amps that sound as close to our ears as that amp does. So we'll take the capture we made, the IR capture we made of that cab that's in the room. It's right behind that wall. It's over there off camera.
By the 610.
Yeah. It's, that Marshall Super 100 1982B cabinet with the Celestion speakers. That cabinet is magic.
There is something special about that.
Yeah.
And this amp, too, I'm pretty sure is this is the experience guitar players want to.
That's
they don't
another
know
video to make.
Talking about this amp, when I played this, I was like, this is what I've always wanted to play and feel.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So the first thing that happens is you pair that impulse response with the speaker, with the amp block that most resembles the amp. Mm-hmm. And that right there gets you...
It does great things.
A long way towards sounding like the capture of or like the amp itself, right? And so at that point, we'll dial in the amp block on the Helix or on the Axe effects to sound as close as we can get it to the mic amp itself. And we're A-Bing the whole time back and forth. And then what we do is we create an impulse response that takes that system from line 6 or from Fractal and matches it to the amp itself. And it sounds remarkably close. And so that's what we're calling the tone match thing, yes, right? And then the Gen 2 process, what we've done in Gen 2 is the incorporation more of the actual speaker and cabinet that we're using when we capture these amps. So the end result is it's just more like the real amp. And where we really feel like you can hear it the most is when you start to run drives into it. If you run your patches so that the amps are, you've got two of the amp blocks and cab blocks in stereo with wet effects going into them, it just handles all of the effects that you throw into it much more realistically, much more like the actual amp itself.
Yeah. I think it's important to say, you said the way you worded it makes it sound like maybe we weren't taking the cab and speaker.
Oh, we were,
but
it's just a more detailed process.
In the process of you trying to like fine tune what to do, you found a way to kind of like measure that almost separately to like make sure, so we could like, it's like zoom in on, all right, this is dialing in to make sure the speaker and cab part is right, and this is now dialing to make sure the amp is right, and then we found a way, and then it gets combined
all of that together, and then it's matched.
So for those of you who are like me, maybe that helps a little bit more, because I know what Brian's talking about. There's lots of AR 212 7B 1215C greenback HB. Lots of letters and numbers that could be confusing.
The speakers in that cabinet, the 1982B Marshall oversized 412 cabinet,
good gracious, it's a mouthful,
are UK-made Celestion G12Cs, which are not available anymore. You have to buy that cab to get them, or you have to buy. You can get versions of the G12C, but they're not that G12C.
They sound incredible.
The amp is rare, the cab is rare, the speakers are rare. It's all awesome. So a couple things about what questions you might have. Will there be updates to older tone match presets? The answer is yes. Many of our older tone match presets have been already updated, and more will be updated. We're not promising that everything will be updated to Gen 2, but many of them will.
Yeah.
Will you have to pay for those updates if you've purchased the patch already? For example, the next one we're going to put out is the Chieftain. I think that's what we've decided.
Yes.
If you've purchased the Chieftain
that was our
tone match patch.
Third one.
Yeah. If you've purchased the Chieftain tone match patch, you're going to get the Gen 2 tone match patch update for free. Because we don't want to make you pay for it twice.
Yeah. And actually, going forward from the moment that this got developed, all future products will be made using this.
Yes.
So it's not like some upgrade you got to like buy or something.
Right. And this started with the Matchless Lightning and the Sir Badger. So those two and everything that we released after are using the Gen 2 process.
Yeah. So like it was like late October.
Yeah, it's a few months ago.
2023. We're hoping that what you hear when you hear the new versions of these amps, you're like, oh my goodness, they do sound like the same amp. The Gen 2 sounds, and what I kept telling Brian is, it just sounds more clear and articulate. Not bright, not chimey and cutty, not that kind of thing.
It's not like a completely different amp.
No, it sounds like the same thing. It just sounds like the 6K version of what we already would consider 4K patches.
That's right.
It's a little more clear, and the drive and the note separation, Brian said this, it's just even better. You're going to love the way you sound. We guarantee it.
So, hey, we've been talking about it. Let's hear it. Let's hear this new Marshall Super 100
bud.
In the Helix, the Tone Match Gen 2 version of it. Check it out. Thank you for watching. Subscribe if you haven't.
Yes.
See you in the next one.
Bye.